All right, Emily, I think we can get started.
Okay. I wanted to welcome everybody to the Q&A with the Bolton Democratic candidates for First Selectman, Board of Selectmen, Board of Education, and Board of Finance. Just to let you know how we're going to do this, where every candidate is going to have a chance to do a brief introduction, and then I will be asking questions that will be fielded by all of those candidates. If anyone on the meeting has any additional questions, please put them in the chat, and I will look for those and ask those as well. So starting off with our first selectman, incumbent Sandy Pirog.
Thanks, Emily. As Emily said, I'm Sandy Pirog, the current first selectman, and I've held that position now for the past 4 years. Previously, way back in my youth in the 80s, I was first selectman for 2 terms as well. Bolton's changed in all that time, and so have I. I have a successful career as a CPA with a tax specialty. I advise multinational businesses down to the small startup entrepreneur. So I know what our residents and our businesses are going through. And I'm proud to lead the Board of Selectmen, and I hope you will continue to allow me to do so. Thanks.
Thank you, Sandy. Running for selectman is Adam Teller.
Thanks, Emily. I'm Adam Teller. I'm a candidate for Board of Selectmen. I first moved to Bolton in the 70s as a child. I moved back with my wife to raise our children because we couldn't find a better place to do that. My parents still live in town after all these years. I hold an engineering degree from Harvard College, a law degree from Harvard Law School, and I've practiced law for almost 30 years as a litigator, mediator, and advisor to individuals and small businesses in East Hartford in my law practice. My firm's a small business. I've been a partner for most of that time. I'm currently chair of the Planning and Zoning Commission and have been for about 5 years. I've served almost 20 years as a member of that commission, and I was also a member of the most recent Charter Commission, which produced the charter revisions that are on the ballot as well. Why am I running? I was raised to believe it is both an obligation and an honor to serve your community and to try not just to sustain it, but to make it better. And note that we're not trying to preserve Bolton like it will never change. We're not trying to keep it in amber. We're trying to keep what's essential and good about it for future generations to find and enjoy as we did and we have and our families have, and take the parts that can use improvement and make them better than we found it. I'm proud to say that the people that you're going to see tonight, the Bolton Democratic candidates, are people who both have the desire to make Bolton better and the ability and the skills to actually do that and not just promise it. Thank you. Thanks, Emily.
Thank you, Adam. Our next selectman who is running is incumbent Robert DiPietro. And Sandy, I think you are going to introduce Robert for us.
I am. Although Bob was considered a very successful training instructor and speakers at national conventions and other meetings for the federal agency he worked for, complications following 2 open heart surgeries have left Bob with difficulty in speaking. That makes it difficult sometimes for folks who don't know him to understand, because it requires listening very well to learn what Bob is speaking. Over the 2 years that I've worked with Bob, I've learned that he's a thoughtful thinker and shares his opinions and thoughts objectively. Since Bob is an incumbent, he's been on the Board of Selectmen for the past 2 years. He's lived in Bolton for more than 30 years. He knows the town, its people, its strengths, and our opportunities. I've observed him at meetings and know from experience that he's an independent thinker, Although sometimes I tried to guide his thoughts, he is very independent and will tell me when I'm off the beam. He doesn't hesitate to question when things are unclear or people, including me. He told me his main reason for running was that he finds the process of governing and governance stimulating. He enjoys interacting with his fellow board members and staff and feels his extensive and diverse experience gives him the ability to see things objectively. Right, Bob?
Thank you, yes.
Thumbs up.
Thank you, Sandy. Now to introduce the candidates who are running for the Board of Finance. Incumbent Bob DiPietro, who you've already met. Amanda Gordon.
Thanks, Emily. So my name is Amanda Gordon, like Emily said, and I'm running for Board of Finance. I am a newcomer to Bolton, but I am not a newcomer to small town living or the world of finance, quite honestly. I grew up in Andover and lived there until I was 28, and then spent 5 years in Manchester before my husband and I, who's also running, decided to settle in Bolton. I got my undergraduate degree at Boston College in biology and sociology. And then I went to UConn to get my master's of social work. For the last 10 years, I worked hard to become a leader in the nonprofit administration world, working to end homelessness in the greater Hartford area. In my last role as deputy director with Journey Home, and now my current role as director of quality assurance for community housing advocates, it's literally my job to make sure that resources are used efficiently and effectively to make an impact in our communities. For any of you who know the nonprofit world, we're no stranger to federal regulations. And so I've had to do a lot of making budgets and complex finances accessible and understandable to those who may not deal with it on a daily basis. And I've done that by building budget narratives as well as pulling together presentations for board members. I think that if any of my coworkers were to talk to you, they would tell you that I'm known in the field for my leadership, my good communication skills, my attention to detail, things like that. I do hope to be living in Bolton for quite some time. And as such, really wanted to get involved. Like Adam was talking about it, civic engagement is very important to me. I think it is my duty, but also a great way to give back and get involved and make sure that the town is the way that we want it to be. So while I think that my skill set is very well aligned with what residents may be looking for in a Board of Finance member, I'm also really passionate about social justice, and I'm really excited to be a new member of our inaugural Diversity and Inclusion Committee that just started this year. So really looking forward to that kicking off. I think that most Bolton folks want a community that's safe, an environment that really empowers the next generation to succeed, and access to basic resources and services that will enrich the lives of all of our residents. And so, if elected, it's my goal to ensure that hard-earned taxpayer dollars are used transparently and judiciously, as they have been for the last several years. And so I would make it my commitment to ensure that on behalf of the residents of Bolton. So thank you for giving me the time to introduce myself.
Thank you, Amanda. Our third candidate for the Board of Finance is John Toomey. John, you're muted. If you could unmute yourself, please.
Good evening, everyone. I'm John Toomey. I'm a candidate for the Board of Finance and also the Zoning Board of Appeals, which I've been an incumbent for 2 terms. I've been following my family's centuries-long example of public service. I have been doing public service since I was in high school here in Bolton, and I'm proud to be a Bolton alumni, just as Sandy and Adam are also Bolton alum. I've wanted to let people know that my experience for the Board of Finance is, fortunately, I served a term from 2009 to 2013. I'm a former president of a small Connecticut credit union for 4 years, a vice president before that. We worked on creating budgets and making sure everything worked for that $13 million credit union, and I made sure that the CEO followed what the board wanted to do. It was very similar to the experience I had working on the Board of Finance a few years back. And I hope that that experience is enough to put me back into your trust to help keep our town working as well as it has. And I want to make sure that the Board of Finance is kept more transparent than it had been when I was on the board prior. Personally, I've been involved in the Bolton Historical Society, the Bolton Alumni Association, and the Bolton Land Trust since their inception 20-some years ago. I was also involved with the Bolton Cemetery Association before it disbanded after being there for 99 years in 2012. And I hope that if anyone has any questions, feel free to ask. Thank you, Emily, for the introduction.
Thank you, John. Appreciate that. Now moving on to the Board of Education, we have 3 candidates. The first one to introduce himself is incumbent Chris Davey.
Thank you, Emily. I'm Chris Davey, candidate for Board of Education. I was born and raised in Manchester and attended Manchester High. I couldn't get out of Connecticut fast enough, however, and at age 17, headed off to college in Vermont. 6 years later, I was in Washington, D.C., attending graduate school, then Oklahoma, where I started my career as a professional editor. I hold a bachelor's degree from Marlborough College and a master's from Georgetown. For 23 years, I've worked in the publishing industry, initially for a publisher of K-12 math and reading programs, where I managed a department of 10 employees and freelancers, and eventually on my own as an editorial services provider. Today, my business has clients around the world. In addition to being self-employed, I've started and managed 2 veterinary practices with my wife, Dr. Latresa Miller, who's running for the Zoning Board of Appeals. Latresa, our daughter Alex, and I moved to Bolton from Oklahoma in 2012. We fell in love with this small rural community, and I got involved wherever I could as a way of giving back. I've coached with the Bolton Soccer Club, ran the annual career day at BCS with Emily Bradley for many years, been the chairman of the Bolton Democratic Town Committee since 2017, and have served on Bolton's Planning and Zoning Commission since 2013. Education has long been my passion, however, and in early 2015, I was invited to serve as a parent and community representative on the Superintendent's Strategic Planning Committee, which produced the Bolton school system's first ever 5-year strategic plan. Later that year, I was appointed to serve on the Board of Education. I'm currently the chair of the board's policy subcommittee, a member and former chair of the curriculum committee, and I also serve on the personnel committee. In addition, I'm the board liaison to both the Capital Region Education Council and the Bolton Scholarship Fund, where I'm the secretary of the board of directors. In 2020, I completed the annual Leadership Academy offered by the Connecticut Association of Boards of Education. In 2011, as Latresa and I were wrapping up the sale of her Oklahoma veterinary practice and planning our move to Connecticut, we kept hearing great things about Bolton, especially its school system. Since moving to town, I've discovered that my ties to the community actually go back nearly 100 years. My great-grandfather, who came to the United States from Scotland around 1908, owned a cottage on Bolton Lake in the 1920s. In those days, Bolton's school system still comprised a series of one-room schoolhouses, and the town had no high school. Education had long been important to the townspeople, however. In fact, establishing a public school system was one of the earliest actions taken by the town's founders in 1732. I'm honored to be part of a tradition that stretches back nearly 3 centuries, and to serve alongside Anne and Rhea. We share a commitment to maintaining the high quality of education in Bolton, to preparing our schools to meet the challenges of the 21st century, and to doing what's best and right for the children of our town. I would be honored to have your vote on November 2nd. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. The next introduction is from incumbent Ann Decker.
Thanks, Emily. So I'm running for Board of Education, and I grew up in New York City. And like Chris said, I couldn't wait to get out of there. And I went to college in Maine, and I attended Bates College and graduated from there. I met my husband there, and he grew up in Bolton. So we kind of took a circuitous route to get here. We started out in Connecticut in Middletown and ended up in the DC area in Virginia for 6 years. I was working in marketing at the time. And at the end of our time there, our first daughter was born. At that time, we decided we wanted to move back to home and be closer to family. And we had 2 more kids. We ended up in the Bolton area about 8 years ago. We built our land, or we built our house on land adjacent to my husband's family. And so we feel very connected to the community. I, as a relative newcomer and with the benefit of having community around here, around me that's been here for a long time. So we have 3 kids. My oldest is in 9th, my middle is in 7th, and my youngest is in 4th. I feel very connected to the school by way of that personal connection, seeing my kids through the schools personally. Since having kids, most of my volunteering time has been in education. It's been helping out the kids in their classrooms. It's been volunteering on boards, both their nursery schools and with my election to the Board of Education in 2018. I'm also an active participant with the PTA. I am running because this is the place where I feel I can do the most good for our community, where I can help out the most, where I have the most perspective, and where I feel like I can be a liaison between other parents and the school community. Thank you.
Thank you, Ann. And our third Board of Education introduction is from incumbent Rhea Klein.
Thanks, Emily. Just trying to get my mic on. Hello, everyone. I've been a resident of Bolton for about 36 years now. It's hard to believe, but that's true. I began to get involved in some of the commissions and some organizations in Bolton when I retired from the educational field. I taught for 35 years in East Hartford Public Schools as a special education teacher, consultant, and administrator. I entered the private sector when I retired from East Hartford after 35 years, and I was the director of a small private state-approved special education program in Hartford. When I retired in 2017, my neighbor, Arlene Fiano, said, "Hey, now that you have some time, would you like to join the Bolton Heritage Farm Commission?" And I said, well, I should. I really haven't done much for the town all these years. And that's really how I feel. That was my start to become civically engaged. And hopefully my goal was to contribute something to the town, that I have reaped the benefits of all these people that you see here tonight who have worked so hard year after year to really make this town as great as it is. So after that, I became a little more involved and did run for the Board of Education. I didn't win, but I've been appointed to replace a retiree and have served for 2 years. So I do have experience, and I have attended curriculum meetings, which is my specialty, actually. And I have been attending the meetings regularly and contribute and ask questions as I see fit. Just a little of my background. I graduated high school from Bloomfield High School, and I attended Boston University, where I received a Bachelor of Science degree. And before beginning my professional career, I obtained a master's degree from St. Joseph College in West Hartford. And then I pursued various graduate courses. I achieved a 6th year in administrative certification from UConn. I went to Columbia Teachers College in New York City for a semester in 1978. And then I graduated from UConn with a PhD in 1995. So I really do love education. I love learning as much. And then finally, I just want to conclude by saying I'm very proud and honored to serve on the Board of Education and the Farm Commission. And I would be very honored if I were elected to serve 4 more years at the Board of Education. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rhea. So those are all of our candidates who are running for the 3 major boards in the town of Bolton. We have received some questions leading up to this Zoom meeting. And so what I'm going to do is ask the questions, and any of our candidates can field those questions, or if one of them is directed specifically to them, I will obviously direct that. So the first question came in an email. If most of the major decisions in town are unanimous, what would be the reason why, all things being equal, that someone should vote the Democratic slate? Why does having Democrat majority or leadership matters, specifically in Bolton?
Emily, I'd like to try that. This is Sandy. You may think that votes are unanimous and we have the same ideology, but believe me, that's not true. What the Democrats offer you is transparency to our meetings, where things are discussed at the meetings, not determined ahead of time and rubber stamped. And I think my board, for example, isn't always on the same ideological plane when we start our discussions, but we listen, we share, we respect each other's opinions for the most part. And we continue to compromise until we do get to a consensus. I didn't see that before when I was on the board under Republican leadership. So ideologically, I don't think we're the same. I do think that Democratic leadership, not only on the Board of Selectmen, but with Emily on the Board of Finance and Adam on the Zoning Board of Appeals, have taken Bolton to a point where civil discourse is the norm rather than the exception. And I'm proud to be part of that and to be a leader of that effort.
Emily, I'd like to chime in with that because Sandy is being modest. One of the hallmarks of Democratic leadership in the past few years, especially with Sandy, has been the quality of the communications that the voters and the residents get about what's going on in town hall and in other things that are important to them. Sandy has a Facebook page. She has made the town website much more usable and informative. When things are going on with the lake, she sends out a bulletin or an alert. If there's a threat to the public safety, she sends out a bulletin or an alert. She goes on to Facebook and other social media and answers people's questions or responds to inquiries about what's going on. That's not something that Republicans have ever done in this town or have ever supported or thought was important. You yourself, as chair of the Board of Finance, have made sure that the voters get clear and usable information about the budget. When I sit as a chairman of the board of the Planning and Zoning Commission, we make a great effort to make sure that our public hearings are accessible to people, that when people come and want to ask questions about an application, they get a decent hearing and a respectful hearing and an opportunity to give their views or to submit their views, and that we don't close a public hearing or that we don't make a decision until everyone who needs to be heard about that application has been heard, if that's possible. We make an effort to make a fair process, but not just a fair process, but one that dives into the facts and gets the facts out there and doesn't hide anything. And that has not, unfortunately, been the history of Republican leadership on the Board of Selectmen or on other boards in this town. And that is the difference. Sure, ultimately, decisions might be unanimous, but that's because Democratic leadership has given a full exposition of the issues, gotten the facts out there, and built a consensus that can allow a unanimous decision. Sandy does that, you do that, I try to do that. I think that that's what Democrats do. We try to get people together behind an idea or a goal. I haven't seen a lot of that from Republicans on the national level or on the state level, and unfortunately not always on the town level either. Thanks.
I'd like to chime in as well, Emily, as a newcomer
That's
to
perfect.
as a newcomer to the group. I want to second what Sandy and Adam said. You know, I moved in about 2 years ago and really wanted to get involved, but wasn't quite sure how. And, you know, my generation, we're all about the social media, and was looking at Facebook one day and saw an invite to the DTC meeting, the Democratic Town Committee meeting. And it said it was open to the public. And so my husband and I thought, why not? Let's just show up. And that's where I met this lovely group of folks and some others that are unable to join us today. And then the more I got involved and recognized the faces and the names, I saw them all over social media, informing the community and letting us know what was going on. And it was very welcoming, and it made me feel like I was important, that they were thinking of residents all the time and wanting to make sure that we were well informed. And I knew I wanted to be a part of that. And I think that being a leader means having people follow. And I think that the Democrats in the town of Bolton really want to, you know, get more people involved in Bolton in a civically engaged way. And so I really want to speak to the transparency and just the responsiveness of the current administration run by Sandy. So thank you.
Thank you, Sandy. Thank you, Adam. Thank you, Amanda. I do want to just mention one post that came in our Facebook Live that someone had said that they definitely like this, that Sandy makes communication a priority. So thank you, Sandy. If there's no other additions, I will move on to the next question. On absolutely everything Bolton, there was a post where several people said it's time for a change. What positive changes have happened in town since Democratic leadership and Democratic majority on the Board of Selectmen? We've talked a little bit about that, but I don't know if there's anything you would like to add.
Sure, if I may. This is Sandy again, for those of you who might be listening and not recognize my voice yet. In the past 4 years, we've taken Bolton to social media, as Adam and Amanda have said. I have a Facebook page. We've improved communication. You know when something's happening because I tell you. The town of Bolton has earned an award by the Connecticut Economic Development Association for excellence in zoning and development practices, something that I'm sure a lot of people listening will be surprised about. But it's statewide recognition that Bolton is a top an easy place for a developer or a business to come in and get started and get through the building and zoning process. We have also gotten a Sustainable Connecticut Bronze Award, which is the first step in showing the world that Bolton is an environmentally, tough word, friendly community, and that we sustain our practices, and we're looking to the future to make the future brighter for those who follow us. I've also been able to keep the tax mill rate lower than it was when I took office 4 years ago. We haven't cut services. We haven't cut employees. We now share services with the Board of Education with our buildings and grounds management. And we're looking at other areas in which we can share services. We refinanced our bonds earlier this year to get a lower interest rate, and that's going to save the town $16,000 in interest over the next 10 years. Let's see, there's a couple other things here. Can somebody give me a hand here?
Well, just speaking from the point of view of the Planning and Zoning Commission, we've approved a number of expansions or new replacement types of businesses in town. And in most of those cases, even with fairly complicated and high profile applications, for example, the one at the mobile station, the one on Route 44 next to the dentist's office, we were able to hold hearings, give approvals, and have those applications get through in one night, which I think businesses have appreciated. And in those particular applications, we and our staff, the staff that worked in Town Hall for Sandy, were complimented on how smooth the process was and how easy it was to do business for those applicants for Bolton. So that was not the perception 5 or 10 years ago under other leadership. And I think it's a testament to how efficient things can be if you do it right. Thanks.
Emily, I'll just jump in here if I might.
Yes, ma'am.
So Sandy mentioned the tax rate, and I'm going to share my screen here for a second and just show a little chart that I put together. Because it kind of runs against the conventional wisdom that the other party is the party that's better for taxes and Democrats are the ones that are not good for taxes. But when Sandy was elected in 2017, partway through FY 2018, the mill rate was 39.47. Sandy's first budget while in office allowed the mill rate to drop down to 39, where it stayed for 2 years, and then dropped again to 38.86. As we all know from this past summer, due to COVID and changes in the amounts of aid that the state was getting, reductions in the interest that the town was able to earn, and various other factors, taxes did have to go up this year, but they're still at a rate that is lower than when Sandy took office. And if you look back at our 2017 campaign, the first item of that campaign was a pledge to hold the line on taxes. And I think it's reasonable to say, looking at what the mill rates have done, that we stood by that pledge. And interestingly, if you look further back into the past, during the period when the first selectman was Republican for nearly 3 decades, when the Board of Selectmen was Republican dominated for all but about 2 years, and when most of the other major boards were also Republican dominated, taxes increased regularly. In fact, from FY 2008, I believe, through FY 2018, taxes increased every single year. So I think Sandy and all of the board members who are involved in crafting our budgets, deserve a lot of kudos for being very conscientious in how they approach budgeting and wanting to both maintain services while still helping Bolton move into the 21st century. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. In my mind, that was the next question that had come in. So I think we've addressed that, so I will not ask it.
Excuse me, Emily.
Yes, go ahead, John.
One of the things that I think is most notable in this administration that we have now, especially in this last year and a half, is the amount of effort that Sandy, the Board of Selectmen, and the entire town staff has made to keep all of us safe. Bolton was, I don't know if it's fortunate or unfortunate that we've lost 5 of our fellow Boltonians to this plague. 3 of them, one was a good friend, one married a high school friend of mine. Another one was on the zoning board of appeals. I remember the gentleman from, years ago. But we've at least managed to stem that tide of death that this has brought to this entire country and world. And I think Sandy's efforts to keep us safe with making sure that everyone is safe in town hall and that there's safety protocols are adhered to pretty much religiously and without having any effect on the services that the town employees provide to our citizens on a daily basis. I think that speaks volumes. There are so many people that don't want the mask requirements and they don't want any restrictions. How many deaths does it take till you know that too many people have been infected? What more? I don't know what more we can say about that good work to keep all of us safe. And thank you, Sandy.
Yes, thank you, Sandy. Your dedication to public safety during this whole pandemic has been amazing. Okay, next question. We've gotten questions about the charter revision that has been been discussed, and it will be on the ballot in November. We actually have 2 of our candidates were on that commission. Both Adam Teller and John Toomey were on that. And I was wondering if you could just speak a little bit about the process and what we can see coming up.
Well, I would like to talk about that a little bit, but I want to start by saying that these are my own views. And I think that neither as a town committee nor as a Democratic slate, we have not taken a position as such on the charter revisions, because I think that's something that each of us probably has to decide for themselves how they feel. But I do want to say something about the charter revision process as a whole. The Charter Revision Commission was made up of 3 Democrats, 3 Republicans, and 1 unaffiliated voter. Both the Democrats and the Republicans on the commission had been often heavily involved in town government. Not all of them. There were a couple of people who had not been. We had a former Republican town chair, at least two former Democratic town chairs, people who had served on Board of Finance, Planning and Zoning, and Board of Education. And the range of views was really about as broad politically as you would, and backgrounds, frankly, was about as broad politically as you're going to see in Bolton. And yet, that group of people with very strong views, very strong, pre-existing views, came in and reached a consensus on just about everything in those charter revision proposals that are being put before the voters this fall. And that's the kind of process, I think, and frankly, I think a lot of that is due to leadership of our former select person and Democrat Gwen Marion. That's the kind of process that decisions should be made in this town, where people from different views and sometimes very strong views come in at one end, and sometimes through a process of honest discussion and respectful consideration, sometimes those views are changed and people come to a consensus and reach an agreement. We see that fail to happen on the federal level and on the state level all the time. But in this particular case, in the Charter Commission, it happened. And those proposals, in my view, represent a group of people who really care about this town, who've been very involved with this town for many, many years, coming together from very different perspectives and asking ourselves, how can we make this town better? And if you throw it out, if you don't consider it seriously, then you got to ask yourself, how is that process going to make this town better? I mean, when is there going to be a charter change? If that process, which was so respectful and so well put together and went on for over a year, isn't good enough for you. So I do ask the voters to seriously consider their own pre-held views, just the way the Democrat, Republican, and unaffiliated members of the Charter Commission did, and examine it with fresh eyes. Thank you.
Emily?
Go ahead, John.
Serving on the Charter Revision Commission was an experience that was fulfilling in a lot of ways. I know it was frustrating in a lot of ways, but we all managed to get along. And as Adam said, there was 3 of us that were party chairs. We had members from each of the major boards, all 4 of the major boards, as representative of the commission. 2 people that did not have any actual government experience, although they've been involved in town in different things. But the takeaway from this whole thing was that we did come from different backgrounds and different experiences, and that we really did listen, because we spent it from the beginning of February of 2020 before the plague came, and we didn't finish until mid-July of this year. And we spent an awful lot of time, far more than I ever expected it to take. 2 of us were on the board had been on the Board of Finance. One of them was the chair of the Board of Finance, and we came to the conclusion that we really need to change the structure of government. I'm okay with what we've come up with. I wanted a town council, but I know how to count votes after half a century of doing this kind of thing. But we're trying to make our government more efficient, more responsive, and having it also take less time with a finance commission with people that actually have experience creating budgets for the town and for the schools. That would save so much time, and Bob DiPietro kind of is in that same, is our test model, because he's on both the boards, and that's the experience we need. We need people to have actually experience in creating budgets. Because that's one thing the Board of Finance does not do, is create a budget. The one thing that I'm happy with the current administration with the Board of Finance is that it's far more transparent, and they run meetings far more efficiently, using Robert's rules instead of Bob's rules. It's just a better system that we're moving toward. And I hope that people can look at the amount of effort and time. There's a lot of video. I know videos take a long time to watch, but they're all on CVC. It's all on their YouTube. I believe it's on their YouTube channel. I could be wrong, but it would be worth the time to look to see just what we went through to come up with all of the changes that we proposed that our fellow Boltonians choose on November 2nd.
And I'd just like to chime in and say, you know, just like Adam said, the DTC is not taking a stance on any single resolution, but we are taking a stance on that we really want our fellow residents to get educated about what the different resolutions are. To take it back to what we said at the beginning, we are very invested in transparency and accountability. And I know that Sandy has some great ways coming up where you guys can find out more about what those charter resolution changes are.
Thanks, Amanda. That was a great lead in. I will be doing a CBC show the third week in October. We haven't finalized the date yet, but it will be, I'm hoping, shown live with a call in. And on October, shoot, don't have my calendar. I believe it's October 19th, the third Thursday in October, I will be doing a presentation at the Senior Center. So if you are a member of the Senior Center and want to join us that day I hope to be joined by Gwen Marion, who is a Democrat and was the chair of the Charter Revision Commission, and also Eleanor Georges, who was the vice chair of the Charter Revision Commission. So we'll be doing questions about that as well. And there's also a question, and it's question number 1 on the ballot, and that is, should the town appropriate $630,000 towards the purchase? I'm sorry, should the town appropriate $810,000 for the purchase of a fire truck and authorize borrowing of $630,000. And I hope to have Fire Chief Bruce Dixon join me on the CBC show to talk about that as well. Again, we aren't taking a position on any of the questions, but we do ask that Bolton's strong residents and voters consider them and think about what it would mean to you if those changes were made or not made. There's also on the town website a series, the questions are there along with a brief explanation. There are 11 questions on the charter. I'm sorry, 10 questions on the charter, 11 questions total. And there's also a write-up on the fire truck. So, and if you send me an email or a private message on Facebook, I'd be happy to try to answer your questions.
Thank you, Sandy. Just to clarify, I think the Senior Center event is a Thursday, which is October 21st from 1 to 3 at the Senior Center.
You are correct, Emily. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. The next question that I wanted to ask sort of each major board, what are the challenges that you see for your respective boards in the coming years? Why don't we start with the Board of Selectmen? If there's somebody who is a candidate on the Board of Selectmen would like to take that one.
I'll start and then I'll let Adam chime in. The town of Bolton is facing some challenges in the future. Our town hall is small. Part of the reason we could not open during the early part of the COVID crisis was the fact that to get from one office to another, you have to walk through someone else's space. It's impossible for the tax collector or the assessor to take a bathroom break without walking through 3 or 4 other offices. So we got to do something about town hall. We've been asked to consider a track at Bolton High School. We're facing the need for a new roof on Bolton Center School. We need to do some upgrades to ventilation at Bolton Center School. So there's a lot of projects in place. And We've done our best to keep the budget affordable. And we need to continue to try to do that. That means taking a hard look at expenditures, a hard look at priorities, and doing things smarter and less expensive. The other thing that we're having difficulty with, like everybody else in the country right now, is finding talented individuals to take our jobs. Right now, we have jobs open in the assessor's office as a clerk, and we are searching for recreation department assistants to run programs for us, and we're looking for a senior van driver. So that's another challenge we face. And as we move forward in bonding, we're going to be faced with how do we pay for that? And one of the ways I briefly touched on earlier was the fact that we had refinanced our existing bonds that have a 10-year life left. And after expenses, because you don't do these things for free, and anybody who's ever tried to refinance a mortgage understands that, we're saving the town of Bolton $16,000 a year over the next 10 years, just in interest costs. Our principal costs remain the same because the principal is what we borrowed and what we have to repay. So some of the challenges we're facing in the future are some of the challenges of the past. They are some of the ignored projects in the past under other leadership. And I think we can accomplish it. Thanks.
Thanks. Anyone else from the Board of Selectmen like to comment before I move on to one of the other boards?
Bob, did you have something? Because I would add, the only thing I would add is that, and this is something that's really come up in just the last year or so, right? Is that towns like Bolton are going to change because of the change in the nature of work and the nature of education, meaning the fact that more people will be working remotely, more people will need the resources that remote work requires in small communities like this one. You know, some of the big employers in Hartford may never open to the point where they did, and that could mean that more people will move out to Bolton, or it could mean that more people will move out of Bolton, and we don't know that. We don't know how a community like Bolton, which is sort of it's not quite an inner ring suburb, it's not quite a suburb. It is a suburb in some ways, but in other ways it's not. And who are we a suburb of exactly? Yukon, Hartford? It's hard to tell sometimes. And, Bolton can't be all things to all people. It has to sort of pick the things that it does well and try to offer that to people. One of the things it does well is provide a wonderful place to raise children and to educate your children. And that's always in demand. Another thing it does well is it has a beautiful connection to the natural world. I mean, with our trails and our open space, those are all things that are highly desirable as a living space. We're also going to have to react to the fact that this country has been deficient in its ability to offer people decent housing. And we're going to be offering more people decent housing because that is the trend. And as our boards, we have to look forward to those changes and be prepared and plan for them. And that is, again, just from what Sandy said about our decrepit buildings, and one building in particular that will eventually have to bring down, the Notch Road Municipal Center, because of deferred maintenance and because it's simply obsolete, just as their town hall is obsolete. A properly run town under Democratic leadership over the past 20 years would have planned for those buildings becoming obsolete. But under Republican leadership, we didn't, and now we're stuck with them. and we have to do something about them. Within our resources, within our tax base, within what we can do, but we do have to do something. We can't just sit on our hands. And unfortunately, that has been the hallmark of Republican leadership in this town over the past 2 decades, including the person who's running for first selectman on the Republican ticket, including some of the people who have run for selectman and first selectman in the past. Sitting on your hands and not anticipating the way the world will change, because Democrats understand that the world will change. Republicans always hope that it won't.
Sandy, did you talk about the solar at high school?
I did not yet, but thanks for the reminder. We have joined, the town of Bolton and the Board of Education have joined with the Connecticut Green Bank to investigate the possibilities of installing a solar carport or a series of solar carports at Bolton High School to provide solar energy to the high school. We did this about a year ago. Unfortunately, when the Connecticut Green Bank went out to bid, and their process is somewhat complex, they didn't receive any responses. So we're back out to bid again, and we should be hearing by mid-November if there is a contractor who will bid on our projects. A municipality is special in that we can sell our solar credits that would otherwise be allowed to a for-profit business back to the either the contractor or the engineer, architect, or the Connecticut Green Bank. So it's how attractive is your project? How much does someone want those credits? And what will the pricing be? So we're very hopeful. And as part of the roof project for Bolton Center School, we're also looking into adding solar as part of that project as well. But that project is still in the very exploratory stages, but we hope we'll move rather rapidly.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, to the,
Emily? Oh, I had a point on the Board of Selectmen.
sure.
They also helped with the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Education with the help of the town staff and the school faculty and staff to come up with a better health insurance plan for all the employees, which saved some money. And there was a savings. And I think that's also commendable. As far as the track is concerned, I'm happy to hear that. There are many bulldogs that we've had championships of track and field bulldogs over the last 55 years. And I think that's an important goal to search for. And I'm hoping that we can also have better internet access, find different ways to tag along with other statewide initiatives that are coming. Oh, and to go back to the charter, there was the one thing that I wanted to mention is 3 of us on the charter commission are Bolton alumni. The three bulldogs that were on that, we grew up with the system in town. We saw it from a young age how the town functions. And 2 of us had the advantage of family members that were also involved in town government in some manner or fashion. So we've seen how things work and how things kind of work. But I think we were able to provide some insight into how things would be better for us, because we've seen how it can fail, especially. That's enough.
Thanks. Emily, I'd like to just address that insurance item that John brought up. When we were putting together last year, the budget for this fiscal year, we learned that our employee health insurance costs were going to increase by a number over 20%. That would have cost the town of Bolton at least something approaching $500,000 of increase in our health insurance costs. The Board of Education and I quickly realized that that wasn't going to go. And we began to negotiate with our unions. There are 3 unions at the town level and 3 or 4, I believe, at the Board of Ed level, and each of them needed to be negotiated with. We were able to join the State of Connecticut Partnership Plan. And in this fiscal year, from what our increase would have been last year, we were able to save between the town and the Board of Education over $450,000. That's a real significant savings. And it came from teamwork with the Board of Education and the Board of Selectmen, and teamwork among our employees and their unions. As a result, our employees got a better insurance coverage plan at less cost to them, and the townspeople won too, because we didn't have to face that tax increase. So thanks, John, for that reminder about that win.
Thank you. I will ask the same question to the Board of Education. What challenges do you see come in the coming years?
Okay, I'll take this one to start. So I think the most obvious answer to this one is just returning to normal life after a pandemic. And right now is the transition period. We went from remote learning and hybrid learning and learning how to handle all that. The teachers had to redefine what it means to be a teacher. We had to learn how to use technology. We had to become a one-to-one school, so one computer for every child. We were not that before. We got pandemic relief funds that helped us pay for those things. Going forward, we're going to have to figure out how to transition that into our budget to make sure it works. Take care of our finances. It is fiscal responsibility without, making sure that our children benefit as much as they can. Our superintendent has a saying that she uses often, that we need to do what's right and best for our kids. And that is with every decision that we make. So transitioning back to normal life, having the kids in school, making sure that technology is working for them, that we are providing what they need. This is our biggest challenge right now.
Thanks, Anne. That's a great start. So some of the things that we are looking at further down the road are going to be some large capital improvement projects. The roof at Bolton Center School is already at least 5 or 6 years past when it should have been replaced. Fortunately, a while ago, we were able to get extended insurance coverage for it that allowed us to continue with the current roof until, I believe, 2022 or 2023. At that point, we won't be able to insure it. We will need to replace it. And it's replacing an entire roof of that size is not going to be an inexpensive prospect. as the climate continues to change and it gets hotter earlier in the year and stays hotter later in the year, we're getting to the point now where it's not uncommon to have heat-related early releases late in the school year or early in the school year. To avoid those and the disruption that comes with those sorts of early releases, not to mention the disruption to the education process that comes from kids sitting on the second floor at Bolton Center School in sweltering heat, trying to learn. We really need to figure out a way to air condition the whole of the center school. Otherwise, it's not going to be a building that we are going to be able to continue to use as far into the spring and as late in the summer as we currently do. Ideally, we would combine those projects, air condition the school and replace the roof at the same time. And hopefully also include solar with that project to help defray some of the electrical costs or the electricity costs that would come with adding a whole building air conditioning system. That's one major infrastructure project. Another is the track, which has already been mentioned by Sandy. It is something that we've known for many years was a deficit at Bolton High School. We actually have an outdoor track team and have for some time, but they have no track to run on. And this past year, the coaches of that team and many current and former students appealed to the Board of Education, appealed to the Board of Selectmen. And as a result of that appeal, the Board of Selectmen has agreed to, at the very least, consider the idea of bonding that package. The soccer fields at the high school are a perennial issue. The drainage of the fields is so poor that not last season, but the one before, most of the Bolton soccer team's home games couldn't be played in Bolton because the field was so waterlogged that it was just unsafe for the players. So we need to renovate the fields, completely redo the drainage, and as part of that project, it would make sense to add a track. If we do them at the same time, there'll be significant cost savings. But doing either of those things with or without a track is going to cost money, and we need to work with the town side and communicate to the voters what the need is and why it is important. As most people know, we at the high school level take students from Columbia. They pay the town of Bolton tuition, and those tuition dollars go to paying down the bond that was used to finance the expansion of the high school. Unfortunately, the number of students coming from Columbia has been dropping in recent years, in part because the number of students growing up in Columbia coming through their elementary and middle school has been declining. They've had smaller classes. But the other issue we face is that Columbia students have a choice. They can go to E.O. Smith in Mansfield. They can go to Bolton. And compared to a large, far larger school like E.O. Smith, it has a track that has scores of AP courses and scores of extracurriculars and clubs. Those sorts of offerings, Bolton will never be able to hope to match on a one-to-one basis, simply because we're such a small school. So we need to focus on our strengths, but at the same time, we need to be building and preparing for the future and making sure that our infrastructure is modern, that it is attractive to the kids from Columbia who are considering whether to come to Bolton. And also, for that matter, our students from Hartford who participate in the choice program. We have to be mindful of having an education system that they are going to want to come to as well. So those are the the big ticket items that are coming down the road, and things that we will definitely have to be paying attention for and planning for.
Emily, this is not, Emily,
Yes.
this is not a challenge, but just the opposite. I want to recognize that Superintendent Hecht has been very helpful in meeting with us in the Board of Finance as well as the Board of Selectmen when it's not in conflict with her meetings, to keep us informed, to tell us what she needs, and tell us everything that will help us be better prepared to make decisions. So I want to credit her. This is not a challenge, it's a good thing. Right?
Absolutely.
Absolutely agree with that. Thank you, Bob.
Emily?
Yes, Rhea.
Yes, I just like to, I agree with everything everyone said. And I just want to add that as all school districts, I think, are experiencing, there is a difficulty finding good teachers and retaining them all across the state. And that's something that as a school district and as a board, we have to really look at, study, and do whatever we, do our best to hire and retain those teachers. And teachers want to feel that they're a part of a good team and that they're making a difference in students' lives. Teachers are passionate people. And so I think that as a school district, we have to provide them with everything we can in terms of curriculum and materials and professional development and all the things that are going to keep them satisfied and want to stay here and continue to give our students a wonderful education. I mean, we are a blue ribbon school district, so we have a great school district and we want to maintain that. But as a small school district, there are issues that we are going to have to address. So we can't always have, as Chris said, all the course offerings, for example. But as a school district, we can be fluid and we can be forward thinking and flexible so that we can move quickly to address the individual needs of our students. So Chris and I were, for example, Chris and I were speaking the other day about the fact that there was a period of time when our students were very interested in studying Chinese. And we were able to, give that instruction to the students. But that interest kind of waned. And so if another interest comes to the forefront, we, as a small schools district, we should be able to respond to that. And so those are some of the issues of, being forward thinking, being flexible, being individualized, that a small school district can provide that a larger school district can't always provide. So I think we just need to keep that as a focus. So I think those two issues, I just wanted to include those other issues. Thank you.
Thank you, Randy. To the Board of Finance candidates, are there challenges that you see in your role as on the Board of Finance that you would like to share?
I mean, I guess I would just try to summarize what everybody else has already said from a finance perspective. It seems like we've got a lot of big projects and a lot of big expenses coming our way, and expenses don't typically go down. And so what I think I've heard is that both the Board of Ed and the Board of Selectmen, with oversight from the Board of Finance, have found really flexible, creative ways to save money. And that's the kind of way we have to approach the future. We have to think outside of the box, because like I said, expenses aren't going down and we're not all of a sudden going to get an influx of revenue. But I do think on the revenue side, it gets to encouraging more people to come to town, more young folks with kids that will invest in that kind of infrastructure. And I know there's some big projects around infrastructure that are hopefully going to bring business into town as well, more businesses into town that will increase our tax base so that we have some more revenue coming in. So I think that it'll just be really important for us to think really outside of the box and creatively to solve the problems that we're facing the next year, and being really planful, not being afraid to budget today for the problems 10 years from now in small increments. And it makes it a lot more manageable than trying to do it in all one fell swoop 20 years down the line when something needs to be replaced. So I think just bearing that in mind as we move forward.
Thank you, Amanda.
To go along with Amanda, I think that we do need to, well, I don't know how much the Board of Finance can really plan. We really don't. We listen. We listen to the Board of Selectmen come in, the Board of Education members come in, the fire department comes in, the buildings and grounds, the road crew members, the supervisors of those different parts of town come in. They tell us what's necessary. They all have meetings in their respective two boards that explain why they need the money that they do. My experience in the past and looking at the attendance records for guests for years, very few people show up from the Board of Finance to bother to learn what is going on. Thank God Bob is already there to tell the Board of Selectmen with his experience on the Board of Finance, and Emily has done well and gone. And I have to say that the former chair on the Board of Finance did attend some of the budget meetings. I was surprised when I first became a member of the Board of Finance in 2009. When I walked into one of their budget meetings, and I actually was asked, "What are you doing here?" And I was like, I thought it was part of the job. And it was never written down. It just, to me, it seemed to be the right thing to do. And I can't believe I'd be in the minority, but it seems to be those members, other board members, did not show up to hear, why do we need all-day kindergarten? Why do we need another fire truck? Why do we need to find better trash services? These are the kind of things that I have already tried to do, and I promise to do it again. And I also promise, if I cannot fulfill any obligations in this office, should something come up, either personally, health-wise, whatever, I'm okay right now. But you never know what's going to come down the road. And I promise I will step out of the way so that the work can continue to be done. And that's something I have maintained with public service people that I've known since I've been involved in public service, that people really should step aside if they can't fulfill the requirements of the position that they've been elected to by the population. Other issues, I can't wait to do some Zoom Board of Finance meetings. I'm sure that's a totally different experience. And I trust that you share all the documents and that we actually get packets of information, because we were always given, information constantly at every single meeting before. But that's I don't see any other challenges at this moment. I know we always want to try to keep taxes down, but honestly, I really do want to keep maintaining my alma mater, which has been a wonderful school system. It was back in the 1930s when Aunt Olive was on the Board of Education. It was a model in Connecticut for one-room schoolhouses. The first year of high school graduation in Bolton Junior Senior High School, when my brother graduated, we sent somebody to the Air Force Academy. There were two kids that went to Harvard in 1980, and that was written up. We've always been a very good school. Now we're a nationally recognized national blue ribbon school, and we need to keep it that way. Our road systems are kept in tip-top shape. The plows keep our roads clear so everybody can get to work. Go into any other towns and say snow's piled up everywhere. Our town crew does a wonderful job, and I want to keep going. And help Sandy keep going, because we have a professional leading our town. We don't need a professional politician.
Thank you, John. I wanted to say thank you to all of the candidates for spending this evening with us. I wanted to thank everybody who is watching this on Facebook Live. And for anybody who will tune in afterwards and watch this, we hope that this has been informative. The slogan for the Bolton Democrats is making Bolton better. And I think that throughout the past hour, you have heard a little bit about what we are planning to do. Keeping our small town charm while still moving the town into the future, looking for the infrastructure enhancements, making sure that everything is transparent, increasing communications, keeping our town a safe place to live, and supporting our friends and neighbors. So please get out and vote in November. And please, if you have any further questions for any of our candidates on the 3 major boards or any of the other boards, reach out to us. We'd be happy to answer those questions individually. Or if there's a group question, we'll respond to it as a group. And I think that's a wrap.